You know, it's a Tuesday edition, orange and blue today. And yeah, it's mock draft season. Yeah, it's draft season. The Super Bowl is over. Mace, I hope you got some rest after your week in New Orleans.
Funny thing is, I just had a nap about, I don't know, 90 minutes or so ago. So even though I got plenty of sleep last night, I think there's still that recovery time, right? So you're in recovery. The other thing that I'm always worried about, at the end of every season, I usually get sick. It's like the body kind of lays down its arms almost that's been keeping you up all this time. So I'm a little concerned that I'm going to get under the weather at some point.
That's right. Take that vitamin C, baby. All right, it's orange and blue today. Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason, and we're not going to do this for every mock out there, Mace, but when it's from someone that we really respect, we're going to talk about it, especially what's an interesting move. Chad Reuter, NFL Network, who you and I are very close with. We're actually going to talk to Chad out at the scouting combine, possibly even sooner than that for this show, but certainly a combine show coming with Chad. He had the Broncos doing something interesting in his very first mock draft at NFL.com, and it was moving up 4 spots for Colston Loveland. We're going to talk about compensation and who else they pick. It was a 3-round mock because Chad's crazy, so a 3-round mock is easy for him. So we'll talk about all that, but just the first kind of idea or feeling you get when you hear Broncos are going to move up 4 spots for a tight end.
Well, it was, okay, what's the situation? What happened leading up to that? And so that's why it's notable that Chad on his mock draft has Ashton Jeanty, running back from Boise State, going off the board all the way up at number 6 to the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that would break some Broncos fans' hearts. And then Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State, who you heard from a few days ago here on Orange and Blue today, going in the top 10, number 9 overall to New Orleans. Of those two, I think the most likely to actually end up in the top 10 is probably Warren, even though in this simulation he's 9 and Jeanty is 6. But the way I look at this and what Chad came up with here is reacting to a situation in which two key skill position players that are positions at which a lot of teams are going to be looking for in the draft here, that with them off the board, that he felt the Broncos had to react. And that's another discussion to be had here, because you and I have talked about the depth in this draft class, and that's why I do wonder if it's the wise play to move up, even if Jeanty and Warren are off the board, and move up for Colston Loveland, who I think you get in the 20s is probably fair. I'm not sure 16 is the right spot for him.
Yeah, kind of the hotness right now in mocks that you see out there. It's like Colston Loveland at 20. Okay. No issues with that. Likely considered the second best tight end by most everyone out there. For me, Mace, I go back to what Sean Payton told Kay Adams at the Super Bowl. We need an elite pass catcher at either running back or tight end. Well, Colston Loveland is a Y, which means he's an all-around, he's a blocker, and he's a receiver. If you said elite receiving tight end, you'd probably think of Elijah Araujo in this class, right? Like, if I think just those words, elite receiver, those 2 words, Mace, he said it to Kay Adams, who he's normally very truthful with. We need an elite receiver. I don't necessarily think of Colston Loveland. And Mace, he's my number 2 tight end behind Tyler Warren in this class.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about here is you're talking about projection, right? Here, yes. when you talk about Arroyo versus Loveland, because like if you just say, okay, pass catching production, they're actually pretty comparable in terms of what they accomplished this past season. With Arroyo, he was at 500 and 90 yards for the season, although he got there with 35 catches. Loveland was right there. What was it, like 586, I believe, or something in that range. got there with more receptions, not stretching the field to the degree that Arroyo was. So, like, that's the question: is Colston Loveland a good pass catching target or an elite? I'd say he qualifies more as good. I mean, I think that's a reason why you're talking about him being tight end 2 and Tyler Warren being tight end 1. There's just more dynamic play that we've seen from Warren to this point. And then the question is, okay, can Loveland project to be that level of pass catcher? And that I think defines whether the Broncos take him or whether they say, okay, the value might be a little bit better. I mean, shoot, I mean, you're looking at this simulation and where the Broncos are at 20. I mean, who's to say they don't go linebacker or defensive lineman if it goes this way?
Yeah, and that's something where I think as we get closer to the draft, you're going to see some of those swings where it's not a tight end and it's not a running back in the first round. I'm not sure how I feel about that, Mace. I'll work out my feelings on this show, which is sometimes dangerous, but like, yeah, I kind of want a tight end or a running back. So Loveland moving up, though, I don't like the idea. Again, we'll talk to Chad and kind of figure what his idea was, who would be after Colston Loveland. Perhaps he's hearing things that, maybe Loveland's a little bit hotter. But I've always felt like Loveland at 20 is just going to be there. Warren in the top 10, yeah, that sounds about right. But Loveland moving up for him and then giving up what you had to give up for him in this mock draft from Chad Reuter, again, NFL Network. Let me see. Broncos send pick 20 along with the 3rd and 6th selection to the Cardinals for their 1st and 5th selections, jumping ahead of the tight end needy Bengals. So there you go. The Bengals likely to lose Mike Gesicki in free agency.
Well, that's the funny thing. I mean, if Mike Gesicki leaves the Bengals and the Broncos say, okay, well, what if we want to get a veteran there? I mean, but do you call Gesicki an elite pass catcher at the position? I'd say pretty good. I think, I thought there was some elite potential when he was going through the Senior Bowl. I believe that was 2018, if I'm not mistaken. Was that the year that he came out? It's been a minute. I think he's leveled off at something a little bit below that, but that's fine. But, what is this about taking the swing on elite traits? Because Arroyo is much more raw at overall. He's certainly raw for anything you're going to ask in the blocking game.
Yep.
And he only has one season of high level productivity to his name. So you're talking about somebody who, and this is another thing, and I know Sean Payne's talking about, okay, you want that elite level. How, of pass catcher, how patient are you willing to be? Because Loveland might be more ready to go out of the box. Mm-hmm. Arroyo might be somebody who, even in that primary aspect of his skill set, you might not be talking about being somebody who's really that refined product until a year or two in. I mean, I guess if you're talking about that, I'll just sort of throw this out there then. In this scenario, do you trade up for Colston Loveland, or do you stand pat and pick Arroyo and maybe you sign Gesicki to get you through a year or so as a primary pass catching tight end? Which would you rather have? I mean, I think that's a fair question as well, especially when you're talking about the trade that's involved here, which involves sacrificing your 3rd round pick, which, as we've discussed with the running back depth in this draft, is something of value.
Yeah, I don't want to get rid of that 3rd rounder, Mason. So let's do that 2-and-2 thing, right? Okay, yeah. Would you like to have Gesicki? And Arroyo is the 2nd round pick, by the way. And I fully believe he will be available in the 2nd round. Maybe you disagree. We can have that discussion. So would you rather have like Arroyo with Gesicki or even a Juwan Johnson? I know a popular like former Saint to the Broncos. Like, would you rather have that? Or would you rather have Loveland, even moving up for Loveland, and then let's say in the 5th, 6th round, that's how far Harold Fannin has fallen, by the way. Yeah. So would you rather have like 2 rookies and then Loveland's more ready to go? Or do you want the proven John Fox term skins on the wall from Gesicki, from Juwan Johnson, and then throw in Arroyo in the 2nd round? I know which one I choose, and it's the latter.
Yeah, I'd choose the latter as well. And also to kind of just tell you what Chad Reuter's thinking on Arroyo, he's got him 45. And so
Woo, right there.
Let's actually talk about the second round here, because I think this is a really interesting thing. And it also points to whether you should hold on to your draft assets and not trade up in round one, because picks 44 and 45 in the draft in this mock draft, this simulation, are two guys we've talked a lot about. Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina, and Elijah Arroyo, the tight end from Miami. So, okay, I mean, there's even another scenario here to say, all right, are there a series of deals involved where maybe what if you traded down and out of the first round and were able to move up in the second round from your pick right now, 51? I mean, what if you are able to have two early second round picks and get both of those players? I mean, realistically, then you'd be getting, I believe on this mock, he would have that based on where he has players going, you'd be talking tight end 3 and running back 3.
Oh my goodness.
If you got those two.
Wow. Highest compliment on this show, Patrick Bateman. Right there, man. Right there. That would be chef's kiss, dude. You're giving me chills just talking about that.
And hang on to your third round pick.
Yeah, once the third rounder was thrown in, and you're not really going to move up for 4 spots, that price tag seems appropriate, but I don't want to move up. I don't want to move up in this class. If Colston Loveland goes off the board to Cincinnati, guess what, Mace? I'm going defensive tackle.
Well, and it's funny. So let's talk about the third round here. And he's got the Cardinals with this Broncos pick taking Deion Walker, the defensive tackle from Kentucky. Yeah, he'd be helpful. All right.
Yes. The
player immediately off the board, Chandler Martin, the linebacker we saw down at the Shrine.
Woo!
He'd be extremely helpful.
Yes. Yes.
Trevor Etienne, a running back from Georgia, he's got him going off the board 3 picks later. If you haven't taken a running back yet, that by then he'd be helpful. Not too long before that 85 spot, another running back you and I have been talking about, Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, who has that skill set that we talk about, that has the elite pass catching ability to him, right? Yep. That has that Joker type. So, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, this draft, I think, Cease, this draft allows you to, at least in round 1, be patient. And maybe there's let's just spitball here and just an idea I had. This is me just kind of extemporaneously speaking. This is a thought that just popped into my head. What if you're talking about the Broncos trading down, but ending up with 4 day 2 picks? That is, it's not what Sean Payton maybe wants to do, because Sean's like, go up, go up, go up. But think of what George Payton could do with that.
Yeah.
And, knowing, okay, Sean, you need these guys. Sean, you need a running back who can catch pass out of the backfield. You need a tight end who can be that joker, who can make plays in space. And, oh, by the way, you talked about linebacker. You need more at linebacker as well, because even if you sign a linebacker in free agency, oh, by the way, you've got Alex Singleton coming off of an injury and in a contract year anyhow. You've got to need safety, and bubbling below the surface is defensive line, which that's an area you just have to fortify, period. I think you're going to end up extending Zach Allen, so it's not like I'm particularly worried about, he's in a contract year. I expect Zach Allen will be extended and be brought back for far more than this year. But you've got this thing of the Super Bowl. It's in everybody's head right now that you've got to find ways to come at an opponent in waves. And what the Broncos don't have right now, is depth on the defensive line. I mean, Zach Allen had a great season. Zach Allen also, the one thing you worry about is, did you ride him into the ground last year?
Yes.
And so that's where you start having the converse. That's where you start looking at others. I mean, you look at Walker, Chandler Martin. If those guys are mid-80s type picks, I mean, yeah, the Broncos could use both of those guys.
Yeah, I think it'd be fantastic. Now, full disclosure, Mace, I don't do defensive players till I've fully done skill position, but an early favorite of mine who's going to be around late first, early second is Tyleik Williams, the Ohio State defensive tackle. He's 330 pounds, brother, and he moves like he's 280. You know what I mean? So he's got 50 more pounds on him, and he just moves tremendously at the defensive tackle position. If you went Williams, move back to 32 or whatever, or move back, whatever, and you take Williams and you take Travion Henderson, I think the back most closely that resembles Alvin Kamara is Travion Henderson in this draft. It's not Devin Neal. Even Devin Neal said, "Hey, I'm Joe Mixon." The back that's most Kamara-like is the one of the two great Ohio State backs. So, yeah, I got some Buckeyes on my mind.
I've got Michigan guys on my mind as well, because we let off this thing talking about Colston Loveland of the Broncos. But, I mean, could you trade down 3 or 4 picks and still get Kenneth Grant? Because in this mock, Chad's got him going number 24. And, I mean, even bigger, 342 pounds of massive humanity that you can put on the inside, who can push the pocket, right? Like this. And what could you pick up for moving down a few slots late in the first round? Could you pick up? I mean, could you pick up a 3rd round pick to move down 4 spots? If you can, I'd say do it in this draft class.
That sounds about right. And in fact, I would be assembling, if I'm George Payton, Mace, I assemble picks this year, because next year's draft, we're not going to be talking about those day 3 gems like we have this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly okay as we get into day 3. And by the way, I noticed Harold Fannin actually in Chad's mock is a 3rd round pick, by the way, not dropping as far as round 5 or round 6. But this is the year it's not a bad year to have a bunch of 6th round picks like the Broncos do, but this is also the year to say, okay, yeah, next year's 6th round pick for a high 7th this year, I would do that. Normally, I am very firm on saying I don't trade a lower value pick for a higher value. I don't trade a lower value pick or a higher value pick in the future for a lower value pick this year. But I think this year's 7 is going to be more valuable and likely get you a better player than next year's 6. The other thing that comes into play, the draft that was very depth shy in recent years was 2021. As you got to the back end, it was kind of a mess. People didn't prepare for that because it was, it was out of COVID. So it was not something that you didn't quite see it coming until a few months out. We're sitting here in February of 2025, and we're already looking and seeing 14 months over the horizon that next year's draft, as you get into day 3, is not going to be as deep or have the quality of this year's. So What that means is everybody's going to be planning a little bit better. In other words, I don't know if there's going to be a Jonathan Cooper with a medical slipping down in the way that he did in 2021. I mean, really, that to me, that's the gem of that draft class for the Broncos, with all respect to the others, but because day 3 was so rough league wide, but the Broncos found themselves a guy to whom they gave a 4-year extension.
Yeah, a fantastic player to be sure. And I look at this class, and we're getting some inside linebacker questions as well. And then Chad Ryder's mock draft, Carson Schweisinger, the UCLA prospect, inside linebacker, is their 2nd round pick again, because they don't have a 3rd round pick in this one. And Schweisinger to me is fly to the ball, find the ball, fly all over the field, speed and thumper type of guy. But still, with what we've seen so far, I would prefer running back, tight end, inside linebacker in that order, or defensive tackle, somewhere there in those 3 picks. But I also think if you go get Zach Bond, we're not talking about Schweisinger at the 2nd round for the Broncos. I think free agency is your answer for inside linebacker.
I mean, the other thing with Schweisinger, I like the pass rush ability, but at the same time, if you take Schweisinger, it's also this is one of those picks that I think is recovering from what we can say is maybe a little bit of a miss, because Schweisinger's skill set, to me, he's a more refined Drew Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
Because the pass rush ability, and perhaps you could project him on the outside as well, although he's primarily going to be in the pass rush, involved in that A-gap 3rd down blitz. So is that so that's in play. But also, if you get Schweisinger in round again in this mock draft here, Loveland and Schweisinger, it's like, okay, all right, but do you really want to end day 2 without having answered running back, without having found that type of pass catcher? Now, it's possible, because there is Devin Neal might be sitting there in round 4, and you might be able to get him. But is that something that you're going to feel good going to bet on after day 2 ends, not having that addressed? That's the thing. So it'll be an interesting conversation you and I have with Chad about this, because I think I'm not sure this is exactly what is the best path for the Broncos here.
Yeah. With something that is debatable, and it's something that makes interesting conversation. And for me, Mace, because of what we talked about in next year's draft, I don't want to do like you did with Troy Franklin, where you get to day 3 and you're like, we got to move up for Devin Neal because he's still there. I can't believe Devin Neal's still there. Yeah, I don't want to have to move up to get him. I just want to get him in the 3rd. You find a guy, you draft a guy. Like, if you fall in love with a Devin Neal, whether it's Omarion Hampton, I doubt he makes it to you in the 2nd. He shouldn't, by the way. But like Travion Henderson in the 2nd, I don't mind. Like, okay, we're not going to get cute with this draft. You find the fit. If Henderson's the fit, if Neal's the fit, you draft the fit, and you don't mess around with it and try to take chances that a guy won't be there. You know, and it almost reminds me of the Braylon Allen thing. Like, I kind of wish somehow they would have gotten their hands on a Braylon Allen, because I think the story would have been different this year. And the story would have been different last year, Mace.
Man,
Braylon Allen inactive in a playoff game? And I'm not going to bang on Audric Estime. You and I both like Audric Estime, but here's the bottom line. Bare bones bottom line. He couldn't beat out Javonte Williams. Period.
I think Braylon Allen is starting that playoff game.
Oh, yeah.
If he's a Bronco. I
think Braylon Allen's starting in October.
Yeah.
Look at chills, dude. Chills. Talk about Braylon Allen here. So if you see a guy and you like
Darren Mugie's about to find out about just how much he can help, I think.
Yes. Darren's going to find out how much Braylon Allen can help in whatever direction they go in the post Aaron Rodgers era.
Yeah. Exactly. And it wasn't a great season for Braylon Allen, no doubt, but in limited work, he had 19 receptions in addition to the 92 rushing attempts. Obviously, that's because you've got some depth there. You got some depth there with the New York Jets, but at running back. But that's, that was the thing. I mean, they did get. I don't think they got suckered or anything like that by Troy Franklin. I think he's one of those guys that just takes a little bit more time. Now, maybe you're feeling a lot better about Troy Franklin at this time next year, and maybe you saw the glimpse in the playoffs, right? That'll prove to say, okay, that's going to work out. But in the short term, it's fair to say at running back, the Broncos were left lacking in the end. I think it's fair to say that. They were left lacking at that position. And I do think, in retrospect, that maybe they were the victims of what Vic Fangio would call a false positive with Javonte Williams and the way he looked in training camp after he lost the weight. I think if he doesn't surge as he did, are you cutting Samaje Perine? Are you, I mean,
There was
I think
Samaje
those
or Javonte
are
at the
fair
time.
questions to have. Yeah.
Yeah, entering training camp, and maybe it would be Javonte then who didn't get dabbed up by Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Did you see that? Poor Samaje. He goes and he dabs up everybody. Samaje stands up, extends his hand, and Mahomes walks right by him.
What did Samaje do? I don't
Dropped
get
the
that at
pass,
all.
I guess, right? He's mad. Like, okay, big mad, bro.
I mean, I get it was a bad day for everybody. I mean, out there. Poor Samaje Perine. All he's going to get is an AFC championship ring. I actually think about that for a moment. You're playing on a team where you've got a bunch of guys who have at least 2 rings, some of whom have 3 Super Bowl rings. Like, what do you think Patrick Mahomes does with his 2020 AFC championship ring? What do you think Travis Kelce does? You think those things ever see the light of day?
No. I think Mahomes puts it on a mobile in his kid's crib.
Yeah, you let your kids play for all intents and purposes, right? And yet for Samaje, the 2024 AFC Champions ring, unless he lands somewhere else that wins a Super Bowl, that's going to be the big thing. And yet for so many of his teammates, it's going to be like basically as useless as a Cracker Jack prize.
Drink your Ovaltine. What? By the way, Jermaine says it here in the chat room about Debo. We have a special Debo show because Mason and I have an opinion that might be quite controversial for some. So tomorrow's show will be on this subject.
I don't know if it's as controversial as maybe you think, Cease.
Good.
I think there are a lot of people who understand that even though he's not of the same build of Debo Samuel, that you may have somebody who can do an awful lot of the Debo Samuel things right here on your roster in Marvin Mims Jr.
Or you may have a Debo in the draft. That's coming up for tomorrow's program.
Oh,
I saw you talking about him. I saw you, Mace.
Are we talking about the same player?
I think so. I think we are.
I mean, I don't want to be a burden here, but
exactly. It's tight like Tiger. Shall we say that? Anyway, he's Andrew Mason. I'm Cecil Lammy.
We're going to be doing the Missouri Waltz.
We're giving it all away. But tomorrow will be about Debo. We got a bunch of stuff, great stuff coming up for you as well at the Combine in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now. But before we're out of here today, Mace, how could folks help us out on our YouTube channel?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell. Ding.
Your voice cracked. So that you never miss vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammy saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.